Okay, well, welcome everyone to our Twinnies publishing conversation, TALA Noa, about the our new book that we are now publishing, and it's in the printer. It's all ready to go. You'll probably be out by next week, which is TALA o KAVA, or Tale of KAVA, where the Twinnies did the English translation, and then I did the Tongan translation. And I'll show you here's the one of the images that we have of this for you to see. I want to just say, first of all, to talk about that the book is bilingual, which is something that we have been trying to pursue, to write both in the two languages. And the way we say that this is a translation is because we have been collecting all the manuscript, all the ways that people have been telling the stories, and creating the story based on that, where we would collect from all the different versions and create the book based on that. And that's why we are referring to ourselves as the translators of these important stories. But as you know, TALA o KAVA is one of the central story of Tongan culture, because KAVA is highly significant to us as Tongans. And knowing the origin of KAVA is important. Now, there have been many different written publication forms of it. Some are in journals, others are in books that are used for examinations and things like that. But this is one where we've put it in a book form with illustrations to be shared with all the Tongans, but especially the young ones, because the youth of Tonga, the young children growing up, this is an important book for them to learn about the origin of KAVA and how it came to be. And the story and the origin is of significance because it tells us our relationship to KAVA, the respect, the way that we relate, especially to the royal family and others. They're all in this book, which is wonderful to see the elements of the culture in this particular book form. And so with that sort of just kind of introductory remarks, I wanted to begin my conversation with Twinnies about just first the creation of the books, and then also maybe some sneak preview of some of the things that we have inside the book for you to talk about. So Anna, with Twinnies, you want to say a few things about maybe the idea of creating a book and of the TALA o KAVA, Tale of the KAVA, and then maybe some of the process, and then we'll continue to have conversation also about some of the contents of the book.
Sure. Why we did the book, I suppose, as Tēvita referred to earlier, several attempts have been made of bringing this story to life, mostly in the form of animation and videos. There's not a scarcity of resources on YouTube and different online sources, but very few literature in the format of a published book is out there formulating the story in a readable format, and not only that, illustrated to better tell the story. And this book was significant in doing that. As Tēvita referred to earlier, we are translators of different people and sources who have prior written about this tale of the KAVA. Not a novel story told, but one in particular that I would like to highlight that we've sourced information from is the writing of Her late Majesty Queen Salute Te Tolu herself in her book TALA, which is out of print. And Twinnies publishing, by the way, has been commissioned by the Princess Royal Tēvita to translate into English once we can find a complete print of it. And in the few samples of pages I found of Queen Charlotte's book, there's a part there where she writes about the KAVA. And in her writings about the KAVA, she tells the story of a KAVA from a slightly different perspective than we are often used to hearing. She tells the story of the KAVA, but she also brings forth the role of Lo'au once he came to know of the monumental sacrifice Whiwanga and Whiwhawha did for the love of their king. And then she talks about how that monumental era-defining moment and what Whiwanga and Whiwhawha did, and the planting of the KAVA had an effect of our Tongan culture, because it is from there that Lo'au instructed Whiwanga and Whiwhawha to uproot these two plants, take it to the king whom they had sacrificed their daughter for, present it to him with specific instructions of how to prepare the KAVA. And the book tells of that journey and how it's prepared, and how the king instructed the KAVA to be tasted by one of his matapule to ensure that it's not poisonous. And then he, of course, takes it later on. And that is the point of start of the Taumafa KAVA as an integral part of the Tongan culture. So the book itself brings to illustration and to story format the tale of the KAVA, the TALA KAVA, according to our very own late Queen Charlotte Te III. And once I got a hold of her writing of the KAVA, I had to pay attention to it. And I changed a lot of our animation clip to take that into consideration, because part of her writing, she says in her writing of the KAVA section, this story has to be told. Ke tala e tala noa Whiwanga mo Whiwhawha. Ke ilo he tonga kotoa. Ai whailau lau ko whai he uruaki o kainga e Whiwanga mo Whiwhawha. So that in short was the intrigue between having some sources of the KAVA and having a completely different, comprehensive account of the KAVA, the TALA KAVA by Queen Charlotte, and how that was brought to form the tapestry of the formation of our Tongan culture. And now we see it here, Taumafa KAVA, and we've adopted that as a backbone ceremonial event from the king down to our people. So I guess that's a short answer to your question. Actually, that was a very long answer, Tēvita, but there.
No, that's a great answer, because it gives the background of why we decided to tell the story of KAVA as a central story of our culture, and especially the role of Queen Charlotte. Queen Charlotte was also referred to as a tufunga fonua because of her role in restructuring and of Tongan culture, and that particular title of tufunga fonua, as the person who becomes the transformer, or the person who recreates culture in new ways, especially the fonua, was also a title that we saw Lo'au, especially because Lo'au was the one who, in the early days of the story of KAVA, was the one who organized the KAVA ceremony. And of course, KAVA is referred to as the Fonua, and so the Tufunga part of him doing this work is a significant and important part. And so, we get to also draw from that source from Gonzalote to tell that story and her understanding of KAVA as a modern Tufunga Fonua, as my understanding of Gonzalote and her role in also arranging and reconfiguring the KAVA ceremony in certain ways. The other element that we included in the book is the poem that Lo'au used to tell the way in the instruction of what to do in the preparation and also the organization of the Taumafakava, the royal kava ceremony. And he does it in a very poetic and symbolic way, and we have included that also in this book, both the Tongan version from Lo'au and also its translation, as it's been passed down from generation to generation. And what I really like about this book is that most of our tradition were in oral form, and it was part of an orature, and now we've taken the orature into literature, and so we now have both of them, which is a way of safeguarding these traditions and making sure that they are passed down from generations to generation. And then the other aspect of it is, the sacredness of the kava, the sanctity of the ceremony is important because we have a lot of, kava gatherings in the diaspora with some of the youth who gets together and they drink kava on social occasion. But it's important for them to learn about the sacredness of kava and where it came from and what does it represent, so that they can continue to preserve that. Of course, the full sacredness of the kava is displayed in the Taumafa kava and then also in Ilo kava. But even in smaller gatherings and social gatherings, there should also, we're hoping that through the book, people will continue to remember the sanctity of the kava, even in those particular area, and what it symbolizes as far as the sacrifice, the caring for your relationship to the Tonga, to the royal family, which began the origin of the reason why Febanga and Fefafa sacrifice their daughter Kava, and all of those sort of kind of important elements to sort of just deepen people's understanding of it, whether they're living in Tonga or living in the diaspora. Those are important. And when you start very young to learn about this and you read it in your the book for the students who are in primary school or in elementary school, as they're called here in the United States, you begin to form your view about the kava early on, and that kava is different from any of the other sort of beverages or drinks that others do, because sometimes people will associate kava with other kinds of beverages, alcohol or other things. The kava is totally different. It has a whole different kinds of cultural significance to us in that way. So I appreciate that all of those elements of our culture coming from Gonzalote and also from the other sources that we drew from are all manifesting in this book that we have on TALA Kava and Tale of the Kava. As far as maybe on the area of animation, Anna, if you can talk a little bit about sort of the reason why you wanted to go with this sort of animation, which I think is beautifully done and it fits the story in the way that it's done in that kind of animation, because obviously the tale you have to imagine what you think the images were, and then put that into book, which Twinnies have been really good at trying to come up with images to tell many of our stories. So if you can say a little bit about the animation, I think that's also important.
Two things I'd like to start off with. First of all, is start off with the illustrations, because that is true. And it's good that you picked up on that point. The illustration of this book is somewhat different to the other books we've done. And the coloring is, we've tried to stay relative to the storyline. So it's all brown washed, the illustrations inside the book, which I think matches the storyline. And so we did it, but it was an interesting process, because when we first drew the Tuitonga arriving to sea, we had the Tuitonga a bit out of shape, and then I said to my team that our Tuitonga was definitely not that out of shape if we could trim him down a little bit. So we went back to the drawing board, had him trimmed up and buffed up, and then came back and then put him under the kapa tree, and it looked like he was crouching with still a heavy figure, so we changed it to match the figure that stepped out of the boat. So the whole process of bringing to life a story with the illustration is such a rewarding one, because to me as a publisher and putting these resources together, it's almost like I could imagine these figures come to life, and putting them onto paper and publishing and printing and getting them out. I hope you will see these figures and appreciate these figures in our mythical stories of our Tongan history, because they are telling of who we are. And then we had obviously Whewanga and Whewhawha. So the illustrations were done in a way to match the storyline. We did not go as colorful as we did compared to our other storybooks, but we thought that this was the best coloring. We had two options of the cover of the book. This cover in particular was the second cover, which we picked that we thought it would be better. That's the finished product of the book. It's galvanized like our last book, The Indigenous Gods of Tonga, same size, and for durability. So if you left it somewhere, the kids can pick it up and read it, put it somewhere safe. And we've stuck to the same structure, where one language is first and the exact same book follows suits after that, just for ease of comprehension. So when you do get a copy of your book, ideally you're getting two separate books, but in one durable cover. And the additional extra part of the book, as Tēvita referred to, is the translation of the poem that Lo'au wrote about the poem, because the book tells, once Lo'au, when he landed on the island and he saw these two plants, which are novel. The kava and the dō tree had never grown anywhere else before. They were novel trees that had sprung out of kava's malae. And he saw them and inquired to Whewanga and Whewhawha, what are these two trees? And when they told him of the story, the book says, and even Queen Salota in her writing writes, he went into deep silence. And after his deep silence, gave the instructions and with the poem. And we can only assume that silence incurred within him a sense of warmth, if you like, formation of the tapestry of the type of people that we are. And that leads on to my second point. Earlier this week, Tēvita, we had one of our followers sent Twinnies a question asking, so did our Tongan values start pre-Christianity or post? And I left it for a while and just posted up our summary response on our page earlier this week. But I specifically responded to the question only making reference to the TALA KAVA book. And the reason because of that is because I felt the answer was well answered by Her late Majesty Queen Salutabo III, when she says, alas, the ultimate epitome of the love of self-sacrifice was done in an era often taught and thought of as the dark era. But the epitome of love of sacrifice was done by Whiwanga and Whiwhawa, the sacrifice of KAVA because of the love of the king. And that was our short answer to the question that was posed, that these values of love, respect that Whiwanga and Whiwhawa had when they went up to the kapi tree to get it to prepare for the king and notice the king resting. Because of the respect for their king, they could not bring themselves to go and ask him to move because he was resting and sleeping because of the shades of the kapi tree. And that stirred them to think, okay, we will let the king rest. Let us therefore consider sacrificing our only daughter. And that tale of sacrifice, o loto ofa, loto tauhi, whakaapapa, loto to, all the values that the formation of our Tongan values and Christian-like values. This story of the KAVA was told prior to the arrival of the Christianity in our shores. So I think that's a very important aspect of this book. And we answered that question with it, and we've got a great response about it. So for those of you who want to read about the full story of what had happened, who had raised that question, you have got to get a copy of this book, because it tells you of why we answered that question in that way. And it stirs you to think as well, is it prehistory or post-history? But it's that subject matter requires a whole different chat time and a whole different panel to answer that question. But I wanted to bring that up as well to address the question that Tēvita had raised about the tale of the KAVA. So the book will be available on Monday. It should get to our door. There was a bit of a delay with the courier, but what you see in front of our screen, that's the actual finished product of the book. We've got a sample supply only coming out for Christmas, so it is important that you order quickly, not to miss out on this first print run.
Thank you, Anna. And I just want to add that the part about illustration that the color is right, because we have it's like in the color of the KAVA itself, right? When you look at KAVA, and it's sort of earth color, which represent the whanua, and of course the whanua is also in that color. So that's why I really like that color, and it's illustration that comes out, because it fits the color of KAVA, and KAVA is a whanua, which also has that earth brown color, and then the illustration is also in that color. It just works perfectly in the way that it's trying to convey this message about the importance and significance of KAVA to us. And then just to kind of connect that to the idea of whanua as caring for our earth and ecology and the world that we live in, because KAVA as a whanua is because KAVA comes from the earth, right? And an important aspect of our cultures that we have kept since the time of Lo'au. And just to add to your point about Lo'au, after he noticed these two novel plants, and then asked Fevanga and Fefafa to give the story of how it came about, and then him going into silence. It seemed to me like he was in deep thoughts, deep thinking, meditating on this sort of very significant, and then from there produced this wise wisdom words that today we continue to abide by that. I know that sometimes even the KAVA ceremony is referred to as the Lo'au ceremony because of Lo'au's role, its important role at the Tufunga Fonua, the person who is actually the structuring the Fonua in certain ways. So all of that just to add to the importance of KAVA. And then to the last point, because questions such as the one that you receive online about our Tongan values, our Tongan principles, our Tongan ideals, did it come before Christianity? Is this a pre-Christianity, post-Christianity, and so forth? I think the story of KAVA and many of the other stories tells us that many of our values, and of course, Her late Majesty Queen Salote Tupo III will tell you that we had many of these values before Christianity. And Christianity came, add to it. Many of ours were woven together with Christianity. And now we have this really beautiful Tongan culture. But what we do in these is to sort of kind of trace this particular line of where many of our values originate, before Christianity, and it's this sort of kind of knowledge is empowering for our youth, for people who want to know about the genealogy of these values that we have that goes back to thousands of years. Values such as respect and sacrifice and being humble. All of those have been an important aspect and allows us to answer many of those questions, both for the ones in Tonga, but also for us in the diaspora, living outside of Tonga and wondering about where did these all begin. So I want to just echo, this would be the great present that you could buy for whether it's for the Christmas or the holidays, or even people within there. We've noticed this even with Her Royal Highness Princess Latufui Pekka's book, where parents and grandparents were buying it for their children or their grandchildren, because they want them to learn about this. So I think the TALA or KAVA, Tale of the KAVA, will probably go in the same sort of way that people will buy for that. Go ahead, Anna.
So I wanted to also touch one point you mentioned earlier, that the usage of KAVA in Australia in particular, as you're aware, it was very restricted, the amount of KAVA that was imported was sometimes, I can't remember exactly, I think only a few kilos. And now the Australian government is piloting a project that allows the importation of KAVA without limited the kilograms you can bring in. The project, I think, is between 3 and 5 years, which we are part of.
Okay.
But it is important to view KAVA not only as a consumable product, but an important element of our culture. And that is part of the reason we wanted to do the book, is to remind our people, yes, it's more commonly consumed now in a more casual occasion, but there is a significant historical tale of the KAVA that forms the tapestry of our culture. And that is often why the information in the general public outside of the Tongan population and the Pacific by large, it is too commonly viewed as a negative source or plant because of the medical consequences it has on people when consumed in large amounts. And we are trying to bring the historical part of the kava with the argument that, well, not so much an argument, but a reminder to non-Tongans that, yes, it does have a medical implication on people when consumed out of a certain amount, but we had those plants planted. We have a significant association with the kava. And I think for those of us, the Tongans, I can only speak for my own people, it's important for us to reflect that part of the kava. So it's not often commonly perceived outward in as a negative product.
Yeah.
So, and the project is closely monitored. So if you've got a permit to import kava, you're monitored for a certain period of time, who you on-sell the kava to, the amounts it's on-sold to. And if at the end of the project, the Australian government deems that it still is out of control, the consumption of the kava, and the restriction has to go back in place, then the importation of kava will be put back into to more control measures, if you like, which we do not want to see, because it clearly has a good implications where we see our young people, our older people come and sing Tongan songs, talking humor about stories in Tonga or here. So there's a certain puke whanua that does occur i he ngahi o wau e maukava. But it is far commonly perceived negatively with a negative connotation because perhaps of the way there has been little information channeled about the historical importance of kava. So I think it is important in spoke not only for our Tongan kava, and some attempts are being initiated by Twinnies Publishing to get this copy of the book to the pioneering groups in the Australian government who are closely monitoring this project about the kava. 3 to 5 years is such a short time to monitor whether the kava can be better consumed within our societies, in the Pacific Island societies, because it's not only a consumable in the Tongan, but our neighboring countries, Samoa, Fiji, all share the importance of kava. And this is our time to say, yes, we do have kava consumed in this way, but it does have a significant cultural implications for us. It is defining of who we are, and it is important in our culture. So the book is instrumental in that manner as well. So we will keep everybody up to date with our attempts to get the book into the committee who is monitoring the consumption of kava. And the good thing, it has its English translation to it, because if they read it, they would have a different understanding of why kava is important. And that's the attempt also that we're using the book for, and why we thought it was a good reason to also publish it.
Thank you, Anna. And I want to say that even in the TALA or KAVA, it does tell us about this notion of balance in our consumption of kava, because in the TALA or KAVA, it talks about kava and kava and sugarcane, And these two plants, as you can see here in the
Balances it out.
cover of the book, right? You see the KAVA that the mouse is facing, and then the sugarcane, the do on the other side, which tells us of these two hoa, these companion plant. One is bitter, the other one is sweet, and you have to balance the two, where you partake of the one, but you also have to counter it with the other, which we saw with the little mouse. And I want to say this because sometimes there is an overconsumption of kava, and even in our tales it tells us that the two have to go hand in hand, and you have to balance the two of partaking one and the other to sort of balance the kava. And I really like that because other scholars have talked about this. Professor Hufang Hayakamalotua Custino Mahina and others have sort of talked about this hoa that must be kept in balance. And even in the formal kava ceremony, you do see that kava has to go with a fono, right? A relish food. And in the beginning, it was to. That was what it is. And then today, it's food such as pork and so forth. But here it's telling us the balance between the two in the way that we consume it and so forth. And I hope that will be helpful to the group who's monitoring this, but also to our people to think about. It's not just kava all the time. It's kava balanced out with others in order to have this harmonious relationship, but also keeping that which with our health and other factors that are important for us. And hopefully those ideas people will draw from the book.
Quintalota herself, when she did her writing about the kava, she wrote up a term which was, we translated it. She says, first it is bitter, then it is sweet.
Sweet, yeah.
And, I loved that phrase because obviously such is life too, with the storms and challenges we go through. And Honorable Frederica Tēvita, she read the Tongan translation of it, and we did the English translation as a backdrop, and she read it beautifully. But it is right, as you have pointed out, Tēvita, there is a balance, and the late Quintalote could not have better put those words together as I referred to just then. First it is bitter, then it is sweet. So that's a balance, I think, is important in the tale of the kava, and we would like to perhaps talk a bit more about in the next couple of sessions we have.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. If there's no other things to talk about our book, then we can talk about our next book that we're planning. So I think I just want to encourage everyone who are listening to our Talanoa today to share this with your friends and with your loved ones, with your family members, and then buy them this gift or buy one for yourself, because this is an important book for us as we continue to create that link back to our culture, and especially to our ancestors who created this beautiful culture for us based on kava and do and all the other important elements that are associated with it. Okay, so with that, we're going to end our conversation today with our new book that's going to be coming out in 2023, early 2023, Hikuleo Matupuanga o Fahu, or Hikuleo and the Origin of Fahu. And, we will probably have other, maybe other way of thinking about this, but here I'll start, and then Anna, you could probably ask. One of the things that we've always been wanting with our indigenous gods, or Ngahi Otua Tu'ufonua Tonga, is to talk about many of our important cultural institutions. Our cultural practice are based on our Tongan ancestors who were also deities, and we are descendants of them. And today we practice many different cultural ceremonies and rituals, but it is important to know what the origin of that. And here we are talking about where the origin of fahu came from in Tonga. And the reason why we've decided to do this, because there are others scholars who have written about this and about this particular origin, but it has never been in a publication that is produced for the mass audience in a way that the language is accessible and so forth. So it's part of the reason why I was happy to partner with Twinnies to try to get this story out of the of Hikuleo as the eldest sister of brother Tangaloa and Maui, who were brothers and younger than her, and how the respect that they had for her and their relationship with one another, and also the way that we, even in our early traditions about the way that things were done, there were tributes to Hikuleo, which continue in our inasi ceremonies. All of those are, that's the sort of the macro ceremony that is now in a micro level that happens within birthday parties, in funerals, in weddings, that we still do in the way that we respect the Mehikitanga, your paternal aunt, your father's sister, and in the same way that these relationship occur early on in the beginning with our principal ancestors, deities of Havea Hikuleo, Tangaloa Eiki, and of course Maui Motua. And to trace that genealogy all the way to the beginning allows us to sort of have a deeper understanding and also to make sense of what is going on today. And hopefully this will be something that will provide that information, that knowledge to the people today, and also the proper way that fahu was created in the beginning, and so forth. So this will be the second book. We started the first book. You have to have the first book in order to understand this book. So that would be one of my to fully understand our Tongan cosmogony, our Tongan origin story. And then from there, we've decided to sort of kind of go into all the more detailed stories of what have emanate from the early stories. Anna, maybe you want to have add a few things to this new book that we're going to be embarking on
Yes.
next year.
Well, first of all, I'm very happy that you didn't use the word Springford.
I'm using new words now.
It's the first time we did the Tangaloa book, he said we sprang forward, and I said, you make it sound like as if I forced you to do this book. No, it's embarking. So
we're using sailing, voyaging metaphors now that fits our ancestors.
I know. So the choice of word is embarking. It makes us sound a lot more logical planned than just bring forward into these books. But we did not spring forward onto this next book, by the way. We did have a discussion on what to do next as a series, because one thing we did agree on was that there has to be a series on these books. It can't be told in one book. It would be impossible to tell all these little stories of our myths in one book, and that's why we decided to do it as a series. As Tēvita referred to, you have to get the first copy of the book, which is The Indigenous Gods of Tonga. And the reason why I say that is because it lays the foundation of you starting to know the very beginning of where we stemmed from, was our point of start as a people according to our Tongan myths. And it nicely leads on. There's an illustration of the book there that leverages off. I can't see if everybody sees it, but you can
I'll make it
see,
larger here in our screen so you
yeah.
can no, stop sharing. Here we go. Yeah.
All right, so you can see perfect. Hikuleo, I think this is Tangaloa.
Aloha Eiki.
Yeah, and Maui is somewhere at the end of the corner here that he is not shown here, but we'll probably add the full one in the next book. But it talks about the division of the land and the underground pulotu, where Hikuleo obviously is given fulotu, the land, and her brothers, or often referred to as a he or she sometimes, the other two, so it's divided. But that leads on nicely also to the second series of the book, because Tēvita and I discussed, so what should be our next book of the series? And there is no short supply of materials and online discussions about the FAO system. And I think it's one of the most commonly discussed topic, because people are intrigued, where does this FAO way of respecting the woman as the way we pay tribute to them in our families. And that's where we come to these sorts of sources to give us more meaning and appreciation why we do practice these this way of these ceremonial ways of relating to the female figure. And I was telling Tēvita, I was reading the Tongan text, which he translated for the book. It's already in complete format, and was intrigued by the detail of knowledge he has and has collated about the way these three figures related to each other, and how that has rippled onto the way which we are now still practicing, the way the brothers tauhi to their sisters is from the whakapapa. And I did laugh a little with a smile when it said, got to the part that said, as a woman, she was better at with creation, and naturally women are perceived to be better at these things. With these things, so that's why the other two brothers thought, okay, well, her Ikule as a woman is taking ownership and of the living and the dead things in a manner that supersedes their skills or their ability to do so, and hence without any force from anywhere else. They were not forced to say, therefore, this is the status quo, that you must to Hikuleo this way. It just came out of them realizing that Hikuleo's skills in looking after all these things were better than theirs. And it triggered in them a natural way of whakaapa-apai.
Absolutely.
And I think that notion in the Tongan term, and I read it again this morning, stayed with me, because I see these ways were not forced upon the two brothers, as we, the younger generations, feel that it is imposed on us often because we do not understand where this comes from. Whereas the first two brothers, they saw how Hikuleo, and I'm sure Hikuleo did not do it intently, but it's perhaps her natural way as a woman, although she is also perceived as a male figure sometimes, and perhaps it's the strength of bringing the male and the female figure together in the format of a woman that gives her these superior skills, if you like, to manage it, and that naturally made the brothers respect her more. You know, that's where they started tauhi to her, like the paternal woman she is. And with such distinct whakaapa and respect. And we see that nowadays, done in different manners with koloa nowadays, obviously. But the brothers do tauhi to their tuofefine.
Exactly.
And they'll find tuofafine. And I think the Tongan takes wonderfully into account those things. And we haven't done the English translation yet, but those contexts, I can't emphasize enough that if you are a young Tongan, and even all our Tongan people, that sort of information, I would definitely want my children, their children, to pick up in their homes and read about. That just gives you more appreciation that these attributes of these mannerism of how the brothers respect their sisters started off naturally from Hikuleo and Maui, because they saw how their sister was better managing the resources they first were given, or the first resource on earth. And that's the reason why she was put on a pedestal, which we still do now. We put the fahu meitanga on a pedestal. Meitanga, obviously, in celebrations, and fahu on funerals. But we still put them on pedestals because of the natural whakanatula ai whakaapapa ko sio ke tau ke poto tau hi ngā ue ai tuofefine. One of the things that the Ngafa book raises, he tahine princesi, that when the sisters, they mkoknau la langai, they not only la langa for their whānau, but they ngahi koroa, they make the Tongan tapa also mindful of their brother's children, the brother's family. So it's a beautiful tie and connection, because Hikuleo, I'm sure, was well aware of how her two brothers paid tribute to her.
Yeah.
She would have appreciated and honored her two brothers the way they honored her. And that way of honoring the two brothers, it was a return reciprocity. Tauhi waha.
Yeah.
Back. Ki ono ongo tonga ane. O tau sioko o ku ki whae ngahe ahoni, the way, you know, ko whangatu whawhine, o nau kei ofa pe o nau whangatonga ane, tau hika nau tolu. Ko hiki nau tolu he nau whangatonga ane, mo whanau nau whangatonga ane. And that's the reciprocity of relations that the Tongan value of tauhi wahaa that we talk about. But that goes hand in hand mo roto tō. Because for ingo fua tauhi wahaa ko roto ku tō. To keep that status quo. But it's a beautiful thing when you put it all together at Tēvita in the Tongan version, how I saw that if it's important for younger Tongans in this diaspora to know that these loto ofa mo tauhi wahaa ke whai he whangatonga ane ki o nau tohewhine started from Tangaroa and Maui kia Hikuleo base koe na ilo i he tonga taanga.
Exactly.
So this next book, that's my sale pitch for the next book. Leveraging off the next book, Tupu Angai Whaho, is such an important book. If you read the Tongan text, what an educational piece. And to have that in your households with illustrations will be a koroa for your home. And it's a wonderful thing that the Princess book touches on.
Yes.
You know, o tauhi ai tuwhewhine, ko ne ngahi koroa, not only for her children, ka koe whanau no whangatonga ane. Ka koe tō ngoe ai tangata me whangatonga ane, not only for his children, but also for the whanau o hono whangatonga.
Exactly.
And that tie is well connected. So that's my lead on to our next book. If I think it'll be good for you to, because when I read it, that part when you wrote it, what a beautiful way of telling it, Tēvita, about the what your thoughts are on those three figures, Hikuleo and how Maui and Tangaloa, the divisions of resources and how the natural aspirations of keeping of relations started.
Yeah. And, it was a very natural element of our culture. There is a deep reason and logic on why the Tufefine was respected in that way. Because I oftentimes hear people say, why do we do this? Why is it that my sister or my Mehikitanga or Fahu gets all these attention? This just doesn't make sense within the Western culture in the way. But when you go back to the beginning and you see how in the early days when our culture was just beginning, and the way that Ikulea was the eldest female who had more understanding of issue related to fertility or creation and all of those things that are associated. Of course, the brothers will defer to her and respect her because she is the one that has those particular. And then those way of relating of Tauhiwa have been passed down from generation to generation. And even we try in this book to also answer the question of Veitapui, the reason why brothers and sisters are sort of kind of in their separate rooms, separate places, and so forth, to explain the reason why that happened from the very beginning up to today. So we hope that this is the way the book is written is we took the stories from many of our stories about Hikuleo, and then we've added some of my thinking about what I think is happening here and how these sort of kind of unfold later in Tongan culture. Or this is where the fahu begin and the way we take care of our mehikitanga in other kinds of functions and so forth. So this will be great because I'm sure there will be lots of debate about it when it comes out, but I think it's a good debate and it's healthy for our Tongan culture to read and to think about this. For me as a cultural anthropologist, I've seen other anthropologists sort of kind of hint at these stories. Phyllis Herda, she's an anthropologist in Auckland University. Augustino Mahina and others has sort of been talking about this is where we think it begins. So in this book, we sort of kind of bring all of them and add our ideas to it. And hopefully this will be something that will be very useful to the people, especially for all of us. And so that's sort of the new book we're going to embark on. But we started the Tongan text, so now we're going to go into the English text. I think we'll be ready by next year.
Next year. We haven't finished the translation of it. We I think it should be out before the end of February. So if you haven't got a copy of the first book, the Indigenous Gods book, you have to get a copy of that to be able to better understand the flow of the series, because once you get all that, you'll have a deeper understanding of it. So we'll definitely finish the English translation by the end of January. Pre-orders will start first week of February, and the book will be out by the end of February. So make sure you get a copy of the Indigenous book. We've only got a very limited supply left with it. It's been very, very popular, the Indigenous Gods book, and we hope it will be the same illustrator Drake, who's done a fantastic job with this Indigenous Gods book, who will be doing the second book on the Puanga o Fahu. And I'm sure, like you said, a lot more discussions will stem out of it, because if anything more discussed is the Fahu system. Why we have it, and it's the most asked about the non-Tongans, in addition to the KAVA ceremony, they're intrigued by why we have such an elaborative way of doing and consuming the kava, and plus the fahu system, why we so let women can't own land, but yet we put them on a pedestal in Tonga, and it touches on those issues because and as an academic you're like, okay, so we put women and glorify them in such a manner, yet the ownership of land can't be given to them. And it gives it a bit of a context as well, a paradox of a context in some aspect as well, because
exactly.
if Hikule'a herself was the first owner of land, why can't women own land in Tonga now? So
I'm glad, Anna, that you said that, because I have thought of this for many years, that when they first divide up the land, that Kelekele, the soil of Pulotu, was given to Hikuleo, and Hikuleo became the owner of that. So we do have something within our tradition that shows that women did own land in the beginning. So I did put that in the Tongan translation. So I hopefully, if you have been able to sort of kind of draw that out, I hope other people will draw it, and maybe we'll have a good discussion about this when it comes out. Yeah.
Well, we can't be too picky of what we allow. I mean, information is supposed to stir up knowledge and discussion. And I think it's a fair question to bring it up. If such is our mythical tales, why therefore the political, and I use this word very loosely, exclusion of women in the ownership of land in the system now? So, and I think those are healthy questions to pose, and I'm not the first one to pose them. And the books are not in any way political, but there are healthy discussions to be put forward, as these are the tales of who we are. And it shows the strength in us Tongans as well, that although we have these political stories, in political guidelines in place in terms of women owning land in Tonga, we are still able to coexist with it, with our mythical stories in place, if we appreciate it. So there's a balance, if you like, still going back to the balance that we referred to and there's a pros and cons of that, but that's another chat time session. But it's good to see these aspects of it being raised by the books, contemporary questions that our first indigenous gods perhaps foresaw that it would affect us till up until this very day. And perhaps the answers to all the questions about land ownership, the lack of the understanding, comprehension why, are all embedded in these tales. That is the reason why we have attempted to bring these stories back to life and to illustrate them. And if we can't read them and understand them with written words, perhaps the illustrations will help to bring better understanding and a healthier comprehension of our stories. So yeah, I wanted to bring that up. I was waiting for the right moment to bring it up. So
I'm glad you brought that up, because it was always my intention to begin to show that Hikuleo owned land in the beginning. She was the the chiefess of Pulotu. So that gives us a window into the past, but also allows us to see how do we deal with that today with women and land and so forth. And so I did not want to be so obvious about it in my writing of the story, but I wanted to just put there to have people think about it, and I'm glad that you saw it when you were reviewing our text. So that makes me happy that came across in the text. So yeah, so thank you. I think this is probably the end of it. I want to say that, you know, our books, all of our books are all connected, including the Ngafa book of the princess. They all tie nicely. They are able to sort of give us views of the other books that maybe other books and so forth is expanded in different ways. So I encourage everyone. We are in the holidays, Christmas. Take buy these books. These are the best present. You're also you know, supporting our Tongan people who are doing this business and doing that. So I think that's the way to go. So thank you everyone for coming. Anna, you have any last things you want to say before we end our Talanoa today?
No, I just wanted to thank you, Tēvita. I did say to you at the beginning, I'm on behalf of Twinnies Publishing, your knowledge is such a koroa to the Tongan people, and we certainly do not want to take that for granted. And reading across the writings, we ourselves learn and better our knowledge. And the publishing platform of Twinnies is only a mere method of bringing those information across. So from our side, we thank you for collaborating on bringing these stories to life to the people. And together as a team, we do hope that our people, we write the resources and put it out in the public to make sure that everyone has access to it. That you do have it in your homes, and your children and your children's children will grow up learning these tales, that if we did not make an effort now to format in a way that we will impart and leave behind when our time comes to impart. And I said to him, I hope you do not part very soon until we extract all the information out of and put into form, because all these stories are important to be passed on to our next generation. And so Malo, thank you very much for always making the effort to put in these stories on paper and for us to bring it out. That's all I wanted to add on.
Thank you so much, and I've really enjoyed working with Twinnies. You know, some of these knowledge that I haven't published with others, I've decided to do it with Twinnies because I like the way that they are, you know, the way that they're putting our formatting, illustration, and working together. So, malo apito, everyone, and thank you for joining us. And hopefully, we'll have another Talanoa in the future, and we'll be able to converse with all of you. So, mafalahiatu to everyone.